He watched the flames climb into the night sky while the city screamed beneath him. Entire districts of Rome burned in an inferno so violent that the heat cracked stone and melted bronze. People ran through the streets carrying their children, their clothes on fire, their voices drowned by the roar of collapsing buildings. And as Rome died, Nero stood on his private balcony, dressed in theatrical robes, singing about the fall of Troy. Ancient historians swore it happened, not because Nero was mad, but because he wanted the destruction. He executed his own mother by collapsing a ship beneath her. He kicked his pregnant wife to death during an argument. He married a young boy named Sporus after castrating him and dressing him as a woman. And when criticism spread across the empire, Nero killed senators, generals, poets, musicians, slaves, and random citizens, accusing them all of treason. These weren't the actions of a mad ruler spiraling into chaos. They were the deliberate performances of a man who believed the world existed only as an audience for his fantasies. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus became emperor at 16. The empire celebrated the rise of a golden youth with artistic talent and a promising mind, but none of them understood the psychological profile of the boy they had crowned. Nero grew up suffocated by manipulation. His mother Agrippina controlled every step of his life, poisoning rivals, eliminating obstacles, and grooming him to rule. She whispered that he was destined for greatness. Nero believed her too deeply. When he became emperor, Nero discovered he loved power not for responsibility but for attention. He adored applause, adoration, crowds. He saw himself not as a ruler, but as a god waiting to be revealed. His narcissism blended with paranoia. He wanted to be loved, yet trusted no one. He sought beauty but created horror. And when people didn't admire him enough, he turned to violence. He spent his early years staging concerts, forcing the Senate to sit through hours of his singing. He raced chariots in arenas while guards prevented anyone from leaving. He locked theater doors so audiences couldn't escape his performances. Several pregnant women allegedly gave birth during his shows because they weren't allowed to exit. But as Nero's ego grew, so did his cruelty. He executed his stepbrother Britannicus to secure the throne. Then he murdered his mother, the person who had placed the crown on his head. He poisoned rivals, manipulated trials, and banished anyone who questioned his decisions. And then, in the summer of 64 AD, Nero faced the event that would define his reign, not because he caused it, but because he used it to become something darker than an emperor. The fire began in the merchant district near the Circus Maximus. Wind carried the flames across wooden rooftops, turning narrow streets into tunnels of fire. Within hours, half the city was an inferno. People smashed walls to escape collapsing homes. Temples crumbled. Warehouses exploded. Families were crushed beneath falling beams. Looters ran wild. Entire neighborhoods vanished in smoke. Nero was in Antium when the blaze began, but he returned to Rome only when the fire had already devoured the city. Some sources say he helped direct firefighting efforts. Others insist he sabotaged them to spread the destruction. The truth is impossible to separate from legend, but what historians agree on is that Nero entered the burning city, dressed in theatrical costume, climbed onto a tower, and performed a song about the burning of Troy. Whether he sang or screamed or simply watched, one fact remained. Rome suffered, and Nero saw opportunity. As soon as the flames died, he announced a plan to rebuild Rome in his image. Wide streets, marble facades, golden towers, and at the center, a palace of impossible scale, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. Its entrance featured a colossal statue of Nero himself. Inside, rotating dining halls mimicked the sky. His architects converted the ruins of Rome into a stage set for a god. But rebuilding required someone to blame. Nero chose a new religious minority, a group already disliked and misunderstood, the Christians. He accused them publicly, weaponizing Roman fear of the unfamiliar. Soldiers raided homes, dragging Christians into arenas. Some were crucified along the roads. Others were covered in tar, tied to stakes, and set on fire to illuminate Nero's nighttime gardens. Guests walked among the burning bodies, while Nero performed poetry nearby. These executions weren't punishment. They were theatrical sacrifices, Nero's dark form of entertainment. His cruelty escalated within his own household. Agrippina, his mother, grew critical of his ambition. Nero responded by ordering her assassination. He tried poisoning her. It failed. So he built a collapsible boat designed to kill her at sea. When she survived by swimming to shore, Nero sent soldiers to stab her in her bedroom. As she died, she reportedly said, "Strike my womb, for it bore such a monster." Nero then turned on his wife, Poppaea Sabina. During a rage, he kicked her in the stomach while she was pregnant, killing both her and the unborn child. Overcome with grief, he replaced her with a boy named Sporus, whom he castrated and dressed in her clothing, forcing him to act as the empress. His obsession with performance grew into mania. He sang on stage for hours, sweating, gasping, shaking, but refusing to stop until the audience applauded. Guards stood at the exits to prevent anyone from leaving. Some senators collapsed from exhaustion. Others pretended to cheer loudly to avoid suspicion. Nero wanted to be adored as an artist, but Rome was learning to fear him as a tyrant. As Nero's performances grew more frantic, Rome's patience evaporated. Senators whispered that the emperor had lost himself in fantasy. Generals muttered that the empire was bleeding while Nero sang on stage. Even the Praetorian Guard, the force meant to protect him, began to question whether the emperor was fit to rule. Nero responded the only way he knew, with executions. He accused senators of treason for failing to clap enthusiastically enough at his shows. He ordered poets, philosophers, and military officers killed for minor criticisms. Entire families were wiped out because someone had joked that Nero preferred music to war. Confessions were extracted through torture. Property was seized. Bodies were displayed on public roads as warnings. Paranoia consumed the palace. Nero believed conspiracies lurked in shadows, that assassins hid behind every column. He executed his tutors, his advisors, and even friends from his youth. He trusted only actors, musicians, and charioteers, the people who lived for applause and told him what he longed to hear. He spent fortunes on festivals celebrating himself. He forced cities across Greece and Italy to award him crowns for excellence in the arts. When he participated in athletic games, he demanded to win even races he failed to finish. When he fell from his chariot during a competition, the judges proclaimed him victorious anyway, and Nero thanked them with tears of joy. Meanwhile, the empire unraveled. Rebellions erupted in Gaul, Spain, and Africa. Armies defected, the treasury emptied, famine spread, roads were unsafe. Trade collapsed, the borders weakened, Rome needed leadership, and Nero offered only theater. But his darkest displays still came in the form of punishment. Women accused of sexual impropriety faced tortures designed for spectacle. Some were stripped in public courts and beaten with rods until they lost consciousness. Others were burned alive in staged ceremonies. Nero described as moral purification. His fascination with mixing performance and cruelty turned Rome into a grotesque stage where suffering replaced art. Foreign observers wrote that Nero seemed possessed by a desire to watch the world bend under his emotions. He alternated between sobbing in public, declaring his loneliness, and ordering mass executions minutes later. His mood could flip in an instant, from theatrical joy to murderous rage. The more Rome suffered, the more Nero retreated into fantasy. He locked himself in the Domus Aurea, wandering its gilded halls while singing to his servants. He demanded more statues of himself. He imagined rebuilding not just Rome, but the entire world into a stage for his talent. But outside the palace walls, Rome was finished with him. The Senate plotted. The Praetorian Guard wavered. Provinces rebelled openly. And soon the emperor who had blamed his city for burning would face the flames himself. Rebellion finally ignited in 68 AD. The governor of Gaul, Gaius Julius Vindex, declared Nero unfit to rule. Spain followed. Africa followed. Armies that once pledged loyalty to the emperor now marched under new banners. In Rome, senators gathered secretly, whispering that the empire would collapse if Nero remained on the throne. The final betrayal came from the Praetorian Guard. Nero had forced them to attend his performances, punished them for imagined insults, and drained their loyalty with constant paranoia. When the Senate declared Nero a public enemy, a hostis, the guard abandoned him instantly. Nero woke to find his palace nearly empty. Servants fled. Guards vanished. Doors stood open. The emperor, who once commanded absolute obedience, now wandered through silent halls calling for help, his voice echoing back at him like a ghost. He panicked. He begged slaves to stay with him. He begged for a horse, a carriage, anything that could carry him away. No one answered. Rome itself had rejected him. With a handful of loyal freedmen, Nero fled the city under cover of night. Disguised, barefoot, and trembling, he rode to a villa on the outskirts of Rome, a place he had once used for secret affairs. Now it became his hiding place. As he listened to distant hoofbeats, Nero realized they were not the applause of a crowd, but soldiers coming to arrest him. He asked his companions hysterically, "Have I neither friend nor enemy left?" He begged them to dig a grave for him. They refused. He tried to work up the courage to stab himself, but his hands shook too violently. When the soldiers drew near, Nero whispered the words that defined his life. "What an artist dies in me." Unable to kill himself, he begged a slave to help. Together, they drove a dagger into his throat. Nero collapsed into a pool of his own blood, gasping, weeping, and trembling. Moments later, the soldiers arrived, just in time to see the emperor, who nearly burned Rome to ash, die choking on his final breath. His body was burned in secret by a few remaining loyalists. No monuments honored him. No crowds mourned. Rome had already begun erasing his memory before the flames of his funeral pyre died. In the years after his death, historians struggled to describe the magnitude of Nero's contradictions. A ruler obsessed with art who created only suffering, a man desperate for love who destroyed everything that could have given it, an emperor whose vanity consumed an empire. History does not remember Nero as a builder, a poet, or a god. It remembers the city he let burn, the family he murdered, the people he tortured for applause, and the emperor who transformed Rome into a stage for his madness. A tyrant who mistook cruelty for power and left behind a legacy of ashes.